Welcome to the Overture Edge, a discussion with today's top business leaders about the motivations and strategies contributing to their current success. It's powered by the Overture Group, a premier executive search and compensation consulting firm dedicated to helping mid-market companies. Your host is John Liacani, the founder and managing director of the Overture Group. He has over 30 years of executive search experience and is also the founder and executive director of the Leadership Group, an executive career management and networking association in the Chicagoland area with over 475 members. Now, here's your host, John Liacani.
Welcome. I'm John Liacani, your host and founder and managing director at the Overture Group. Welcome to another episode of the Overture Edge. Today, we are honored to have Lisa Pinion with us to discuss one of my favorite subjects, onboarding. Lisa is the founder of Pinion Solutions, a boutique consulting firm that specializes in building award-winning organizational cultures to accelerate business results. The firm achieves this by aligning corporate engagement and cultural strategies to drive bottom-line impact and enhance the employee's experience. Lisa has nearly 30 years of experience in human resources. Before founding Pinion Solutions Group, she served as a senior vice president of human resources for a major insurance firm here in the area. Also, I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with Lisa since 2017 in the Leadership Group. She facilitates the HR leg of our stool. So, Lisa, welcome to the pod. How are you today?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here because you and I have talked about onboarding on and off. We've had numerous meetings within the Leadership Group, but even sidebar conversations on onboarding because you work with your clients on onboarding. I work with my clients on onboarding. We have two different processes, but all trying to achieve the same results in accelerating the employee's performance in an organization and getting a return on the investment, which is great. And we know organizations that excel in onboarding, right, and take it very serious are more likely to cultivate strong cultures and yield high performance. Also, when you have effective onboarding in my world, it helps attract, motivate, and retain top talent through onboarding. Onboarding, to me, is a table setter, and it sets a standard.
Absolutely.
So today, a few things we want the audience to walk away with is what is onboarding? 1, 2, what's the framework behind it, and how do we implement it and institutionalize so it becomes a process that is a way of life. So with that, let's get right into it. So let's talk about really what is onboarding, because I will have numerous conversations with clients and prospects, and I'll ask them, do you have an onboarding process? And then when I dig deeper into what exactly they think onboarding is, what it really ends up being isn't onboarding. It's more just employee orientation. So the first question I have for you is, what's the crucial differences between basic employee orientation and onboarding?
So that's a great question and a very common misconception. So orientation is more of an event, where onboarding is a process that really starts with the recruiting process. Onboarding starts with the first interview, and even before the first interview, honestly, with that first connection with the company. So onboarding is that whole piece of the candidate experience all the way through, I'd say your first, 180 days to 6 months, that whole really acclimation to the company that sets the new hire up for success, to make sure we've got the right person in the right seat at the right time.
So it's the difference between orientation is an event versus
right
onboarding, which is a process.
Absolutely.
So getting off to a great start for new employees is very important, that experience. So that first 90 to about 180 days, what are some specific goals or some success metrics for leaders during that time? What would you say those are?
So the first 30 days are really about building connection, right? It's about making sure that you're getting to know the right people. Then it's about building knowledge and then building ownership. So everything within those first 90 to 180 days can really be chunked, I think, into those buckets.
Okay. So with that, let's segue into now the framework and kind of what goes behind onboarding. And we're going to talk about 4 pillars today. And the first pillar I want to talk about is relationship building, whether it's internal or external. What relationships and stakeholders are most crucial for leaders to build early on?
So I think it really does depend on the role, but it's certainly going to be, other C-suite and functional leaders, direct reports. There could be external stakeholders in there, so banks, brokers, clients, vendors, suppliers. It could be board members. And so I think it really is going to depend on the role, but those are things that each new hire is going to have to figure out in those first days, weeks, talking to people in their connection process. Who are the people that I'm going to have to build those relationships with early on?
And now some of the framework, what we highly recommend is you get the go-to people internally. You meet your staff, you meet those go-to people, but also externally, depending on who you're going to be dealing with on the outside, whether it's a vendor, right? For example, I do a lot of CFO placement, and we always talk about the external relationships are the bankers, the accountants, the insurance brokers. Meeting with them very early on so they understand the history of the relationship, and also very, very important so nobody's blindsided and there's no surprises. What issues is the company possibly having with some of the vendors early on? So that's why it's so crucial early on that not only internally but externally you develop those relationships.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the second pillar now. It's systems and process understanding, right? And really learning how data flows within the organization. So what internal knowledge tools or systems do you feel executives need to master quickly?
So I think, again, it's going to depend on the role. So for accounting and HR, for example, they're going to be a little bit different. Some of those systems are going to be homegrown. Some of them are not. Yeah. So I think it really depends on the position, and then the level of the depth of knowledge is also going to depend on the position as well.
One thing we highly recommend early on, and part of our onboarding template that we have, is that early on that the new hire takes about a half a day, a week, to document the systems they'll be working with and or responsible for, so they understand how the data flows. Not that they're going to do anything with it, but that's a great way when you document the system and how data flows. You'll understand, especially when you got to troubleshoot something, and we know we all have to troubleshoot, where do you start?
Absolutely. And I think understanding too which systems feed into each other and integrate is a loose word, but accounting systems, HR systems, even learning management systems connect to each Salesforce, even how that data connects and which ones feed into each other is a really pivotal piece.
And making sure you know who the go-to people are for those different systems.
Absolutely.
If you have questions or things pop up, you need to know early on who those go-to people are.
Absolutely.
All right. Next one I really want to talk about now is how you build company knowledge. I know when you interview and you're doing your due diligence, you understand the organization, right, and the company, and what interests you. But how do we even better and deepen, right? How do we do get a better understanding of what a company does?
Yeah.
Once you're there.
So I think in addition to all of the traditional ways you've done, like you said, you've done your research through the website. You can look at different sales materials and RFPs and all of those things. The best way for me is really talking to people and doing those targeted interviews and asking those questions, getting the historical knowledge firsthand from people, also understanding like what are the sacred cows? Like what are those pieces of, you know, what are those untouchable things that maybe you don't know are truly sacred and need to be preserved, elements of the history, of the culture that if you didn't know better, you know, you might try to change. So what are those things that need to be honored? What are those things that truly are unique and different about the company beyond what people would know? Then, you know, the standard, you know, going through your due diligence process of the financials and all of the other components.
Yeah, I think that's real important. You know, I'll just add to that. I think if there's a strategic plan, making sure you understand what that strategic plan is, and if you're specifically going to be responsible for some of those goals or objectives, understanding that and getting that early on. If you're in sales, making sure you get the sales plan, those kinds of things. If you're in accounting and finance, make sure you see the last audited financials, any bank reporting, the last 3 months of P&L, all of those documents. But there's one thing that I also want to bring up about building company knowledge. It could start also before the person starts.
Right.
And what we've been doing, and I've got an example for you. So building company knowledge could start before they even get their day one, because I just did a placement. And I always get concerned when somebody accepts a position and they don't start for a month. And so I worry about how do we get that new hire engaged right away. And so we take some of the onboarding and we do a thing called pre-boarding. And a great way to do this is building company knowledge. So what we did with this new hire in this organization is we got him those documents ahead of time. So he's reviewing those before he starts.
Perfect.
So on day one, when he's there, he's already ahead of the curve.
Perfect.
Which is well, but it's the employee engagement, the new hire engagement is really what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So yeah, any information on the product, on the services that can be reviewed ahead of time, and then any of those cultural, historical, kind of intangible elements that people can learn, the more information that can be gathered, the more data points, the better you're going to be set up for success.
Excellent. All right. Move from building company knowledge now to the fourth pillar, which I believe this fourth pillar, the most important one. And the reason being is a lot of times if I go out and we do formal 4 to 6 month follow-ups, and I ask if the train is not on the tracks and the employee isn't tracking, I ask one simple question. Do you meet with the new hire on a regular basis, and are you giving and receiving feedback from that new employee? So expectations and feedback, the fourth pillar, is very, very, very crucial. So what are some clear 30, 60, 90-day objectives for feedback in your mind?
So every leader should be meeting with people at a minimum a monthly basis, but ideally more consistently. So meeting with their direct report, meeting with their peers, and meeting with their team members to get specific feedback. So what are the things that I need to do to be most effective in this role? How do we need to partner together? What are our priorities? What has already been working? And whether it's the 6 months or a year, what do we need to do to partner together and what's working today, what's not working, and how do we get this, if it needs to be put back on track, how do we get it back on track?
And that's why, and we recommend it's either weekly or bi-weekly, that you're not only meeting with your team, but the person that you're reporting to, so you can give and receive feedback.
Right.
But I always get this, I work with the person every day.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you work with them every day. You're putting out fires. You're doing tasks. you're not giving and receiving feedback.
Right.
And that's why I feel this is the most crucial step in the onboarding process. And also what you do is you take the onboarding plan and you see how you're tracking against the onboarding plan in these feedback sessions as well.
Right.
Which I think is paramount to a new hire's success.
Right.
And acceleration, because it's all about the return on the investment. You're investing in people, and this is a way to accelerate the investment.
Absolutely. And people are not comfortable giving constructive feedback or appreciative feedback in some instances. They're also not comfortable receiving it. And so to the extent that we can coach and help people get more comfortable with that process, the better it is in every instance. And so there are tools that we can use to help them with that process, and question sets that I give people. So question sets that I give in onboarding. So question sets to use with your manager, question sets to use with your peers, question sets to use with your team. So you build up framework
for them.
Yep.
Yeah. And that it helps accelerate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do that. We do that as well. I think the process needs to be formal. It doesn't need to be rigid.
Absolutely.
But it needs to happen.
It needs to happen. And it needs to happen consistently. Yeah. So, and someone needs to be accountable. Yeah. So
you need to take ownership.
Absolutely.
And so I always tell the new hire, you need to take ownership of this. It's your responsibility because you want to be successful in the organization. All right. Next, we've talked about the difference between onboarding being event versus a process, right? Orientation, event, onboarding process. So here's the next question. How do we so we don't fall into the trap of this happening as an event and we institutionalize and we implement, how do you implement this process if you don't have it? What do you recommend for your clients when they don't have a process like that, so they can implement it and then make it a way of life?
Right. So there's a couple of different things. I know you have tools that you recommend that you provide to your clients and candidates. And if they don't have something, starting small at a minimum, and at least taking something and putting it in place, and then using it consistently, just one step at a time, put one foot in front of the other. But every new hire is responsible for their own success. If there's an HR team, making sure that they know that they're responsible for the client or the new hire experience rather. But getting a team of people who can help make sure that this becomes a process where every new hire is set up for success, that we understand all of the elements of it. It can be, can be as simple as a checklist where it's, a series of tasks and everyone goes through the same thing, but everything has to have owners. Yeah. So, but it takes commitment, it takes rigor, and it takes ownership.
Yeah, it definitely does. And then once you have that in place and it's consistent and you institutionalize and it becomes a way of life, the last question I have on implementing and it becoming institutionalized, and a lot of questions I'll get, we do a lot of executive search. Mm-hmm. But can onboarding be done at the executive level all the way down to staff level?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it should be. So, and it should be. The activities might be slightly different, but the components are exactly the same. So, because you still want to set that new hire up for success. So you might not be giving them access to the strategic plan or the board minutes, right? But you do still want them to know the history of the company and the components of the culture that are important and why we do things the way we do. So you still want to set them up for success. You just might not give them the same access to the information.
But now we're engaging from the top, leaders all the way down to the staff leaders. Yes. Everybody's on the same page.
Yep.
So excellent. You and I can go on and talk about this for days, but I think we've given the audience some nuggets to take away. So let's just recap, all right? So we now have a better understanding the difference between employee orientation and impactful onboarding, right? One's an event, one's a process, right? And hopefully it's institutionalized. And remember, onboarding, I said this before, it could be a game changer. The 4 pillars of onboarding that we talked about are the relationship building, whether internal or external relationship building. 2 is the systems and process understanding. 3, building company knowledge. And the 4th pillar, expectations and feedback sessions. And then we also talked about how we ensure that we implement it so it becomes a way of life in the organization. And again, I get back to what I talked about. Those organizations that have a good onboarding process or a great onboarding process align themselves better with high-performing organizations.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Any final thoughts on onboarding before we wrap this pod up today?
So my kind of take on onboarding is you really only have one chance to make a first impression.
Sure.
So you want to make it a good one. New hires, regardless of the level, want to know that you expect them. Yeah. So the thought, intention, and preparation that goes into an effective onboarding program definitely is worth the return on investment. It translates to more engaged new hires, better business outcomes, and more profitable hires. And again, you're going to have better outcomes because you're going to retain the hires because people are going to be happy with their decision to join your company.
Absolutely. And you get them on, you get them engaged day one. Or even prior to day one, right?
Absolutely.
And like you said, it starts in the interviewing process all the way through.
Absolutely.
Well, excellent. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Lisa. We'll have contact information. And remember to follow us on all socials. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thanks for
coming to the pod and sharing your experience and your expertise. I was excited to have you, and I learned a lot today as well. So great. And we look forward to seeing you, the audience, again in our next episode of the Overture Edge pod. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for being a part of the Overture Edge, powered by the Overture Group. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our LinkedIn page, and visit us at theoverturegroup.com to stay up to date on the latest executive recruiting and compensation trends. If you have any questions or would like to contact us, please email John at jliacone@theoverturegroup.com. That's JLIACONE@theoverturegroup.com. Thank you again for listening.